Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Seddon And Lacey's Comic Stash. And this is the first of our deep dives into what will be a 2-part episode about the beast that is this bad boy, Knightfall Volume 1.
My beast was slightly thinner because I read it digitally on the iPad. But the same amount of pages, I promised.
Yeah, 26 quid for that bad boy. Not the cheapest in the collection.
I can't imagine holding it whilst reading. It must weigh a ton.
It sits quite nicely in the lap.
Okay.
So, before we go into the ins and outs of the book, what did we know of Knightfall pre-reading Knightfall?
Well, I was around at the time, and I guess that's not just like I was alive, but I was heavily collecting comic books at the time when Knightfall came out. I mean, this is stretching from, I think, 92 to around 94 to 95. And when I say 92, I think some of the preemptive setup work was done in 92 for some of the characters to come. So it wasn't a heavy reading time of me. I'll be honest, I think I read one issue of this during the period that it was actually coming out, because as we've said previously, I'm a bit more a Marvel boy than I was a DC boy, but I was certainly very aware of it. I think if you were collecting comics at the time, you couldn't avoid a lot of the visuals. One of the visuals, obviously, we'll talk about as the episode goes on, because it is quite big in the Batman mythos. But yeah, so a kind of a broad understanding of the idea of the story, but without any real knowledge of it specifically. How about yourself?
See, I obviously saw the image that, obviously, as we'll say, we'll go into later, and obviously when it was then in Dark Knight Rises done, I was like, they're pulling that from that storyline. But this wasn't at a point when I was reading Batman stuff. Well, I say it wasn't. I was reading the stuff that was related to the animated series, which was a very different beast, and in that, Bane's the crazy luchador. He's not the Bane that he is in this. So obviously I'd seen the imagery of it, but I'd never read any of it. See, something that we go into in the second part is a guy that, other than the games, I've never read anything that he's been in, with Jean-Paul. So that whole stuff was completely new. Obviously, as I said, I've known it from the Arkham games because he turns up in those, so you sort of know a little bit from there. But yeah, I had sod all knowledge of any of it other than the big talking point before cracking into it.
And I think it's quite interesting, and obviously we're going to crack into this in a little while, and we'll actually talk specifically about this character because he plays a big role. But you mentioned him, Bane, and Bane, your knowledge of him being from the animated series, and of course the way that Dark Knight Rises touches on this story and borrows bits from it, and probably, you know, a lot of people will only know him from that, or some people will know him from and I can't remember, was it Batman Forever that he was in, or whichever?
Poison Ivy.
So I think most people, if they actually go back and read him from a comic book style, you're getting a very different Bane than what you've seen in other media. And I think probably comic book wise, I think there probably is some progression from afterwards. So I think that'll be interesting to pick up when we go through as to the Bane we get to know in this compared to the Bane that we probably had knowledge of before picking up Knightfall. Yeah, I mean, it was a strange timing in comics because, I mean, this story started towards the tail end of the death of Superman. Spoilers for anyone who didn't know that Superman died at some point in a comic book. But that was the other sort of massive DC storyline going on at the time. I mean, I was reading a bit about this story, and I don't know, there was a lot of talk about how this wasn't in reaction to the death of Superman, because the death of Superman sold gangbusters for DC. I think it was their biggest selling title for a long time, if not ever. And I did sort of read some stuff from the editors saying they'd had this story planned 2 or 3 years in advance. So it wasn't kind of a knee jerk to trying to keep their franchise on top. But I mean, I think contextually, it's kind of worth, as we go through this story, understanding that the comic book world was huge at the time. I mean, this was just after Image Comics had launched, and sort of a couple of years after Marvel had their huge success with X-Men, X-Force, Spider-Man, all new #1s where they were selling millions of copies. So it was a real boom time in the comic book industries, and I think publishers were really looking for storylines that would grab headlines and grab attention. And as I say, Death of Superman made it onto like American news. So I can only imagine that they were hoping for the same reaction out of what they do in this story. But obviously that's a little bit down the line. But yeah, contextually, it's coming out in a big time for the comic book industry, and I think they had high hopes that this would be forever remembered. And again, I think when we get towards the end of this, we can start talking about our impressions on it. But certainly, I think that image, the one that we will get to, will be forever remembered in comic book fans' minds. But yeah, I mean, yeah, contextually, this was a big storyline for DC. I think this is one that they'd put a lot of backing into to try and get them the same media attention that maybe Marvel and Image Comics had been getting at the time.
It's the thing, obviously, this is, before we sort of go into all of it, it is quite a dark story.
Yeah.
Which, when you think at the time, obviously you've got things like Spawn coming out by Image, a lot of the Image stuff. Because I watched the documentary that was on Sky recently, the Secret Life of the Secret World of Comics or something like that. And they did a whole thing on Image, and I didn't realise it was them that did all those bits and pieces. And it was just like that was that sort of dark period when, as a whole, there was a lot more edgier stuff coming out. Yeah. And, yes, Batman, other than, say, the Golden Age, when like in the 50s and 60s, has always been quite dark, and obviously 80s Batman that was its darkest. It's always been still quite mainstreamly good.
Yeah.
It doesn't go that edgy or something that massive, whereas this, I think, again with obviously the Death of Superman stuff as well, was a mainstream version of going dark and edgy and sort of doing that whole anything can happen.
I think you're spot on with that dark and edgy. I mean, like, derisively, often this era of comics is talked about as the extreme era. Everyone, based off of a lot of what was coming out of Marvel and what was coming out of a lot of the Image partners when they jumped out of the Marvel stuff. Everyone had spiky armor, big guns, lots of pockets on their outfits. And comparatively, Wolverine was probably the biggest Marvel hero at the time, but of course more of an anti-hero. He was someone who would kill people, like he'd kill the bad guys. And of course, one of the big tenets of Batman is Batman doesn't kill, which we'll get into when we kind of get into this story. But yes, this was I think a time for them to go a bit darker, as you say, and capture that edgy extreme audience that was potentially out there. And of course, there's some real extreme examples of that, but that will probably come in part 2 when we get to part 2 of this. But yeah, certainly I think this is, I mean, quite interesting for me when you sort of say dark, is this has quite a heavy look at what it means to be Batman, and what it means to be a man who is doing this stuff day in, day out, which I quite like that as a concept. I quite like seeing the toll this life would take on a human being. So I think comic books and comic book movies are often criticised for they just take an absolute battering and they never show any signs of the damage. They get back up and they're fine. And this did seem like a time when the writers wanted to throw everything they could at a character and then just show how much of a toll that can take. But yeah, it certainly speaks to the dark and edgy side of comic books at the time.
Yeah, it's that. Obviously, we've seen it again, sort of going back to like the Arkham stuff, like when you did like Arkham Knight or Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. The whole sort of concept of it was all set in one day, or one night. And this very much it's a little bit of a longer thing. It's not all in one night, but it's that sort of constant toll of what they can go through. And also is that naysaying thing for all those people that, you know, when they come out and like, there's 27 billionaires in the world, and why has no one ever been Batman? This is why.
yeah. Oh, and funny you should say that about that, the time element of it, because it's something that comic books are quite wishy-washy on a lot of the time because of their monthly release schedule. And, you know, like 10 years worth of comic book stories is what, like 120 issues if it's publishing every month. So, you know, when you've got like a long story, I think it's hard to, and of course they don't want to age themselves, but yeah, you really do. I mean, it's something they do focus on is they make you very aware that this is happening over a period of time, and they clearly show that, which is one of the compliments I really have for the story. But I guess we're getting a little bit into the story and what we liked about it there. But yeah, I mean, I think it goes to show that we've both come into this like a bit cold. I mean, we did our top fives on the last episode, and I think there's, for both of us, obviously there's a load of familiarity with those stories because we've read them a lot. But it was quite nice us reading something about a character we both know and love, and a story we have some wider understanding of, but actually getting in there and reading those issues. So yeah, I guess probably nothing better to do really than to kind of jump into it. I mean,
obviously it starts with our introduction to Bane, which threw me for a loop a little bit because, as I said, the Bane that I knew and the origin that they made out for the Bane that I knew was he was a Mexican wrestler that had been just pumped up with the Venom serum. Turns out he was a South American kid that grew up in a prison.
And you know, like we talk about where our Bane history comes from. And again, I had a little bit of knowledge about his origin, although I'd never read the story in full before. But it leans more towards the Dark Knight Rises one, doesn't it? Because the Dark Knight Rises one, you know, like with some big liberal changes, but the Dark Knight Rises one obviously has him as a child growing up in a horrible prison. And I don't know, how did you feel about it, going from the Mexican luchador wrestler to the imprisoned child in a war-torn country?
See, it makes more sense to the stuff that was in Dark Knight Rises, when, you know, you get that infamous, you were just built by the darkness, I was born to it, raw. That makes more sense there
than it ever did. You can do all the impressions.
That makes more sense than obviously what we'd had before, because as I said, because in the animated series when they introduce him, they do a bit of him being a wrestler. It was just like, I get that Bane fits that thing, but it actually makes the character, when you do see it, because Bane's very rarely in big things. You know, we've had 2 appearances of him in films, but only once as a real bad guy, because I'm not counting him in Forever, because he's just basically the hired muscle.
And strangely, like when Forever was being filmed and released, and they said they were going to have a Bane, obviously it wasn't that many years removed from this story, and I knew how much of a big part he played in this story, so I did think that the introduction of him would lead to more with him. I thought it was like a setup for them doing something akin to this, but of course it was such a bad version of it, and such a bad movie, although, you know, that's probably a topic for another time. But yeah, I was quite surprised to see him when they were saying that Tom Hardy had been cast as him for Dark Knight Rises, and I think it was so far removed from this story that I was shocked from the other direction, thinking, wow, I'm really surprised they're going with Bane as a major villain. But I think, you know, it probably speaks to like Nolan's love of Batman and what he wanted to do with it, the fact that he went to Bane as the villain for that piece. But yeah, I mean, I, as an origin story goes, there were some parts of this I really enjoyed. I think that idea of a child growing up in prison and learning both, well, basically all the bad stuff you can learn in prison, like how to kill, how to manipulate, how to be uber violent, but it not being instantaneous. You know, there is that switch point for him, isn't it? Because for a large part, when he's at the beginning of the origin, when he's in a prison, he's taken away from his mum, but he's put in the same sort of prison, and then unfortunately she passes away, and then he's kind of left on his own. And you know, prison scumbags want to sort of prey on the weak child, and ultimately he gets knocked off a balcony and goes into a coma. And we'll come back to kind of the coma thing in a minute, but it's sort of post that where he flips, the switch flips, and he decides that, you know, he's going to take care of himself, and he's going to build himself up. But in that kind of coma scene, he has a revelation, really, doesn't he, about how he needs to sort of take care of himself. He needs to have a harder edge, because ultimately he's got to face his greatest fear, which is the bat.
Yeah. And it's that sort of thing of like, it's a little bit shoehorned.
Yeah.
That his greatest fear is the bat. But then obviously every bad guy needs an origin, and he has no reason to be in Gotham. So have him have this moment where, you know, when he's in a coma, he finds out there's a Batman, and you know, it's one of those, it fits for what they needed to do with it as an origin. But again, as I said, it's a little bit
fudgy, isn't it? It's a little bit like the because I think they, you know, I think up until that point, certainly in that issue, it was all going like well for me, and yeah, I'm with you. Shoehorn was the term, and I thought, you know, like there's probably, and again, easy for us to do in retrospect, but there's probably smarter ways of doing that. You know, like it didn't necessarily have to be a bat. You know, it could just be like I don't know, some sort of representation of power or justice, or you know, like controlling interests, things like that. The things that put him into like the position he was. But yes, it just felt a little bit like an unfortunate sort of shift in the sand that they rely on throughout the rest of the story, and it just felt like a bit of a cheap way to get there. But I mean, one thing that I did think was quite nice is that they then kind of fleshed it out by having a fellow prisoner in the prison who is and a character I'd never come across before, but Bird, who from the way I read it, and I'm presuming this is the case, had been maybe like a kind of minor villain in a previous Batman story. So then I think that kind of pulled me in a little bit more, because he started to tell Bane about Gotham and about Batman and things like that. And I thought, well, actually, I can see this, that this guy who's building this power base and wants to show himself as the, you know, the toughest, the strongest, the greatest that there is, hears about this one man who is in effect controlling one of the most violent cities in the world. You can go, okay, I can see why Bane wants to take him on, why that would seem like his biggest challenge. So I thought that was quite a smart way to get the Bane obsession of Batman into play.
Yeah, I think you could have done without the coma flashback bats, and just have Bird telling him about Gotham and the authority that Batman has. Because obviously, never being in prison myself, I don't know, but obviously from any sort of portrayals of what we see for prison things, there's always the anger of the inmates towards the wardens and the guards and the authority. Yeah. So there's the obvious put together. Yeah. That you can go, right, there's this guy who is so like the mega warden. Yeah. He wardens a whole city. He takes down shit tons of criminals. And, you know, he is top dog. Go prove a point and knock him off his perch. Yeah. The key figure of justice, you can take him down. And by doing that, you can show that you are the peak of physical human condition. That at that point was what he was, I guess, leaning towards with his
I say his training regime, but his training regime, which seems to mix of kind of montage pull-ups mixed with murdering, which was an interesting way of training yourself to be a badass. It's just murdering lots of people. But yeah, I mean, as I say, I think there was just that didn't serve the story so well. And I think, yeah, as I say, I think they actually come up with, like, later on in that same issue, kind of better ways to transition into his obsession with Batman. The other thing I had about the origin story that I guess kind of, I don't know, left me a little bit cold. And as I say, I generally quite liked it, but there was just a few moments in there where it was a little bit too generic prison for me. You know, and maybe there's a reason why. Maybe prison life is like that. But kind of the big beefy paedophile fella who, as soon as he realised the kid's mum was dead, he was like, all right, over to you. Yeah. And the other thing that I had an issue with, and you mentioned it earlier, and so as his origin story continues, he's still in prison, and overall he's starting to pretty much run the prison from within, isn't he? You know, like, there's not many challenges to his authority, but he's still in prison. But then we start to hear about government trials, and there's some experiments going on with prisoners in this Santa Prisca prison, where they're being pumped full of something that we don't know what it is at that point, but generally they're kind of dying out, and they see Bane have a fight for memory, and I think they kind of go, well, hello, let's pump him full of this stuff. Then we kind of get, as I say, him being pumped full of what we know as venom, and that is sort of driven out in the story that it's venom, to, I guess, take him from the 9 to 10 out of 10 peak physical condition that he is to above and beyond. It enhances his strength, his speed, his agility, and his brain power. Did you buy into that venom part of the story?
See, I do, because it is a very standard trope of, here is special magical liquid, look at what it does, aka look at Captain America, look at it's been done thousands of times. The thing that I like, which obviously we'll go about over later when Bane's proper Bane, obviously it's not he has it and he's got it forever. It's basically like a nitro upgrade, sort of like, you know, just to push you through that next bit. So for that purpose, it fits for what Bane then goes on to do. But part of me thinks the story shouldn't be him then wanting to go and take over Gotham. Should he not want to fuck up these government agents that are building through shit, full of shit?
I mean, I quite liked. I mean, one of the reasons why I asked the question is up until that point, I quite liked. He was almost being portrayed as it's almost a what if. Like, what if Bruce Wayne was stuck in a prison? Like, what would have happened? And like, you know, up until that bit, he's doing it all on his own desire, his own power, his own sort of lust for violence. And I don't know, there was a bit of me that said, and of course, you know, we'll come back to this later as the story goes on, but there's a bit of me that almost said, I think at this stage I'd have preferred the idea of just Bane trained in a prison against Batman trained in all the ways that he was trained along the way, and see them as two human beings at their peak going against each other. And the introduction of the venom just felt a little bit, again, felt like something extra that wasn't needed. But I guess it does pay off and play off at later dates. But there was a part of me that just kind of wishes they hadn't had that venom part, and it was, as I say, just a bit of a here's someone who has the same capacity as Bruce Wayne had. He just come about his skills a different way.
Yeah, so basically, like the light and the dark of it, like the same, two sides of the same coin. Yeah, it does. It makes sense. But as I said, I think I think you need to have something to make him a villain.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
just being because his start point as a child in prison,
it's very sympathetic, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So where's the reason why I'm not meant to like you?
I mean, I guess you could lean on the murdery part, but yeah, I do. But the thing is, I do think you are right. I do think you chuck a child in a prison unrightfully that early on. Yeah, I think he would have been a lot more sympathetic character than he is. And Jess, you are spot on. You know, they don't try and show him as sympathetic at any other point today. You know, like here is a villain. Here is a villain that is going to do villainous things. So yeah, you probably are spot on with that. It does assist that part of it, and maybe that went through their mind of introducing that because they didn't want him to be at all sympathetic. But yeah, there's just a part of me that goes, oh god, I'd love to see like these two dudes just go at it toe to toe without anything else. And of course, I'm sure through much of the media, that Venom side of it has probably been used and taken away. Certainly there's some other runs where I've read that where like, you know, the venom is removed from his body and things like that, so I think it gave him a lot to go through over the years. But just at this stage, I don't know, I was just slightly disappointed that it had to have that, but as you say, comic book tropey, you know, the super soldier serum pumped into him, but successful. So, you know, they did something right, didn't they? Because they turned him into a right badass. And of course, then for pretty much the rest of this, you know, that they have their major breakout of the prison, and the horrible prison warden sees rough justice as he's thrown to his death. But then we kind of fast forward to Bane going to Gotham and his first experience of Batman, like the Batman, and again, I thought it was quite interesting. So he sees Batman taking on a group of like pretty generic thugs, aren't they? Pretty generic mafia, like a kind of Gotham thugs. But in the fight, one of them falls or is falling out of the building, and you see the strain and the effort that Batman goes to save this bad guy's life, and it's that kind of realization to Bane that his opponent, his greatest opponent, doesn't kill. And I thought it was really good, bearing in mind that I think when they were writing this, they knew that they had a longer story to tell. I thought it was really great to kind of hammer that home right here. You know, like these are the inherent differences between these two characters. Yes, they may both be trying to push themselves to their utmost to achieve their goals, but here you have someone who would kill with reckless abandon to get what he wants, and here is someone who wouldn't even take the life of a villain or someone that he's fighting at the time.
Yeah, it's that going to, obviously, as we all know, Batman does not kill, and obviously that we'll go over that a lot more in part 2 of this. But it is that sort of one guy has a moral compass and a code that he will go to, and this one will quite happily kill and do what is needed to get what he wants. So, you know, as I said, that there's the two bits that really sort of emphasize the fact of it. He is not a good guy. Is he will quite happily kill, and he's got the super soldier.
Well, and to layer that in so early to make that abundantly clear to them that they are, well, abundantly clear to Bane that his opponent here has a limit, let's say. So already, I guess he's kind of by following, by witnessing the Batman, he's starting to almost get an advantage early doors, isn't he? To kind of go, I know your limits, I know your barriers, so I now know something about you that I can use against you. You know, again, it's just the intro. I mean, this is before even the kind of the official Knightfall story actually starts, isn't it? But you can clearly see in this that they're layering in that they knew that they were doing something with Bane, didn't they? You know, like this wasn't a one-off issue that wasn't going to have this long story payoff. You know, they put a lot of effort into this issue to set up that Bane is going to be a nemesis for Batman and not a kind of short-term, overnight, one-off, monthly comic book. Here he goes. Here's a big lad. Yeah, punch him in the bonce. He's done for. So yeah, I think as a setup for what is to come, I think it's a really good because it's an origin story and a setup for a longer story, isn't it? Whereas more often not in comic books, you tend to get an origin story and then later on they craft a bigger story around a character. So yeah, I thought it was a very good opener for me.
Yeah, it's that. I said it does very much do what it needs, and the fact I think there's like a year between the Vengeance of Bane, which is his intro, before Knightfall starts.
Yeah,
is one of those you've got this, it's sit there in the back of your head, you forget about it, and then you get the payoff.
So funny you should mention that, because I think where what you read and I read slightly differed. I bought them digitally, and the bundle that I got had the Knightfall story and it had a prelude to Knightfall. And funnily enough, you got the Bane, the Vengeance of Bane story twice. You got it at the beginning of both of them, but it does actually piece in some of the comic book stories in that year. So some of the Batman stories, and funnily enough, I'm quite glad I'd read some of that, because there's some characters that are going to show up in this first part that I would have had little or no knowledge about if I hadn't have had those sprinkling of issues in this prelude. And also what they did do in that year gap is you did kind of see Bane in the background a little bit every now and again, but not much. But more so, there was some real push to how hard a time Batman had been having it in that in the year of comic book publishing, let's say, rather than necessarily the year of real life. You know, that all of the stories do layer on that it's one villain after another villain after another villain after another villain. So you really do kind of see that there's a bit of a war of attrition going on with Batman at this stage. So yeah, I mean, that's the only bit where I think we vary is like one of the editions I got had, and some of those stories in the prelude as well were like quite older stories, so origins of some of the characters who show up later and things like that. But yeah, like, so for context, there is maybe a little bit more fleshing out in that year gap of some of the people who will play a part in the story as we go on from here.
So we go into the main part of the beginning of Knightfall, and basically it is a great bit of storytelling of let's just open up Arkham Asylum and let the nutters loose.
It's odd, because I mean I haven't looked it up, but it seems like such a good idea. not for a good guy, obviously, but for a bad guy, it seems like such a good idea. Is let them all go to create, and I presume this is the first time they've done. I mean, I'm sure they've done like escapes from it before, but that as a concept of basically just kind of rocking up onto a hill near it, getting the bazookas out and starting to fire it in to actually release these guys. I thought it was a great idea, a great transition into the story. And as I say, when I was reading it, I was going, wow, if they hadn't done this before, you almost go, why did no one think of doing this before? So yeah, I thought it was an excellent idea.
Yeah, it is that sort of thing of like, as a way of a story beat, it's the easiest way to sort of go, this is why everyone's out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it works from both sides, because it works with what Bane's main goal is, which obviously we'll get to later on. But also, it's an easy way of going, right, everyone we need for the story, there you go, they're all out.
And I guess for context of it as well, is it even gives you that little bit of, well, he gets some people put away sometimes. You know, like the fact that so many had to escape from it, I think shows like, I don't know, the merit of the work that he does is that there were so many of his villains locked away. You know, like it is a bit of a bit of a comic book sort of trope, the prison escape, or you go, well, you captured that one 12 issues ago. Why are they kind of loose in the streets? And again, it gives you a very good reason. Is someone went, let's get them all out with some bazooka shots. And of course, you know, it gets us early doors in the story, because I think this actually counts as like the issue before Knightfall, doesn't it? I think this is like kind of the prelude to Knightfall, isn't it? Where you know, you get to see the Joker in there, And you get to see some of those familiar ones, because I'm sure when they were writing this and publishing this, as I say, it was a real boom time for comics, and I'm sure they had huge hopes for this story. So I think to a large degree they were probably going, a lot of people might be reading this as their first Batman. They might have some knowledge from the movies, but this might be their first Batman story. So I think again it gives a new reader a bit of familiarity in this world, and probably get them to stick around for another issue.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like, because obviously they break out Joker, Scarecrow, Riddler. So you got Poison Ivy. So you got your named ones, and people that also, if you've just watched the animated series, you're going to know because they're in that.
Yeah.
And obviously the way that Scarecrow's drawn in this is very similar to the animated series version. So as you say, if someone's coming into this as like, oh, we've got a new Batman thing, if all they've known is the animated show, it's an easy sort of thing of, oh, that's them.
And funny enough, you said about Joker. I mean, I actually kind of wrote down that Joker was, I think, interestingly drawn across all of this, because I think it had a touch of the animated series, a touch of kind of what Joker probably looks like now, and even a touch of the TV show Batman to it, and like making him sort of that really, really overly skinny, spindly version. I think was a kind of nod to go, if you're joining this from the animated series, you won't feel totally detached from this. And as you say, same with the Scarecrow. Like the Scarecrow's body in this is impossible for a human being to be like, I'm sure. But again, from a visual style point, I think they were good and bold choices. We do across the story, and we'll touch on it as we go through. But we do get like most of the story is written by two writers, Doug Munch and Chuck Dixon, but there is an array of artists across a lot of these issues, and I don't know, we'll kind of pick up on that. But I think for the most part, one of the overriding feelings I had about the art across Knightfall was it felt like they made a lot more effort when they were drawing some of the more iconic villains than maybe they did with some of the others, and with some of the other art choices along the way. I certainly think a lot more effort was piled into making the Joker look good, or as you say, the Scarecrow look good, and particularly when we get to it, there's some fantastic art for the Riddler later on and stuff like that. But maybe not as much due care and attention paid to some of the lesser known ones, unfortunately for me. But,
people like Zaz doesn't look like Zaz should.
No, and again, like the jumping ahead a bit, Firefly was also one where I just like, I don't know, it felt a bit like me drawing it and going, right, we'll just get through the pages where he's on, and we'll kind of shift on from there. But I mean, certainly as I say, like there's some real effort, I think, put into this issue to go, right, if this is your first Batman comic book, because you've heard that comic books are cool at the moment, here's some stuff that you'll have some familiarity with, stick around for the rest of the story. And as I say, what a story you're going to stick around from. Like you've joined an issue where all of the villains, and I say all of the villains, all of the ones that were locked up, but most of the villains have just been released out of prison, and they're going to cause havoc. So I don't know why you wouldn't stick around if you'd read it, this is your first time reading one.
Yeah, as I said, if it was back in the day and I'd have picked it up, I definitely would be buying the rest of them as they came out, because it was like, I need more of this, because everyone's here, everyone's having some fun.
I did write down again, sometimes when something catches you funny, all the strange things that go through your head. So for me, like I've seen a lot of Tim Drake post this, but for me this is my first kind of Tim Drake Robin experience from this time, and again my first Jean Paul, and it was strange because for all that care and attention I think they put into making sure we're on board with the way the villains looked, you kind of get introduced to them too by Tim Drake giving John Paul a haircut. Yeah, randomly for free panels, and it was just a strange one for me. It just struck out to me of going, what a weird way for me to be introduced to those characters at the beginning of this book is Robin giving him a haircut, and not a lot more substance to it than that, other than like a little bit of a, hi, I'm Robin, and you are learning from me because Batman said you should learn from me. Lovely haircut, by the way, that sort of thing. And it was just that was a bit of a strange one for me.
So with this, it basically goes into Batman is, I wouldn't say tasked, but has to go and get everyone that's gone out.
There's a bit of self-tasking to it, isn't there? Like when you look at it, like no one says this is your job, Batman, but they make it very clear as the story goes on, and really early on that he sees this as this is his mission, isn't it? He needs to bring all of these back to prison, bring them all to justice. Like this is no one else's job but his. Almost in a way as if he was responsible for it, which like he wasn't, but yeah, really kind of pushes on that idea of and again probably that juxtaposition of him being the ultimate sort of symbol of justice for Gotham is that all of these people are people that he's put away before, so he must gather them all back up before he then goes and takes on Bane. Because he is aware that Bane did this, and he is aware that Bane is, let's say, the ultra villain or the big bad for this. But he's going, no, like all of these people, I can't let Gotham suffer because all these people that I previously put away are out on the streets. I need to make sure all these are back in Arkham, and then I can go and get Bane.
Yeah, and it's one of those of there are some people in here that, as I said, aren't sort of well-known villains that we get and go through. But I was personally happy to see Mad Hatter because as a fan of the '60s show, that's where my Mad Hatter knowledge comes from.
This issue is Mad Hatter focused, isn't it? Like he is kind of the first one
that he takes out.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of describe this as almost like the trials, the labours of Batman, isn't it? Like he has to go through all of these, and the order is somewhat picked by the order that they start committing crimes. But Mad Hatter is first up to bat. I did like early on in this issue, you had a couple of bits where I think he had it, or it's right at the beginning of the issue, and I think when they go to the Gotham City Police Department at some point, I think they have a whiteboard up with all the names, and I did quite like the fact that within the issue they kind of gave you the context of these are the ones that you should expect to see because these are the ones that escaped, and I kind of like that framing. So okay, so the Mad Hatter issue. So how did you find your Mad Hatter experience?
See, I liked it. I was, as I said, as a fan of the '60s one, expecting the little hat to pop up and the weird ray gun eyes to come out of the top, circa '66 Batman. But again, because of the game, I've known the sort of very Alice heavy referencing and things like that. So I really enjoyed having the Mad Hatter in it. And it's
a very dark version, isn't it, compared to that '60s one, isn't it? It's almost that '60s one put through that gritty, edgy '90s lens and comes out the other side a lot more of a kind of a twisted, sadistic, evil, like rather than a mad cat villain. He is actually, as we see in the issue, quite happy to just gun people down for the heck of it, really.
He loves the carnage.
Yeah,
and he wants his chimpanzee back.
Who doesn't? No, like
exactly.
That's an age-old tale that we can all jump onto, isn't it? Like I've been driven to murder many a time when my chimpanzee's been taken away from me.
But yeah, it's one of those of coming out of this. It was a character that I'm like, I would quite like to find some more stuff where Mad Hatter's the bad guy in.
Well, and I think we'll touch on this a few points during this, because I think that, again, this was not only a unique way of being able to do something very dramatic in the world of Batman, but it is a unique way of being able to do exactly that, to have focus on all these individual villains, some of them that maybe hadn't had great focus for years, and show them in a different, maybe more interesting light, and get people to want to read more. I mean, we're gonna come on to one in a little while that did kind of for you, did for me what Mad Hatter did for you, I think. So yeah, I think it's good. And of course we do also, I think they take the opportunity quite well in this to show Bane and Bane's viciousness, because the Mad Hatter sends one of his cronies to kind of track down Bane, because they kind of reverse tracking systemed Bane, and you do get to see Bane take this one for himself, not send a lackey out, and just brutally destroy and kill one of these cronies just for the audacity of daring to show up near where Bane lives. And let's be honest, he just batters him to death, and it's quite drawn out over the issue, isn't it? I mean, like, I would say quite graphic, but I guess more often than not, you're just seeing his arms swing, and you know there's someone underneath who's being hit. But yeah, they really do lay the groundwork here to go. If they didn't show it enough in him being a mass murderer in that prison, they go, well, even when he's out of prison, he is going to hurt people and hurt people badly.
And he doesn't care who he hurts.
Yeah. It's not like he's only going to attack good guys. If a bad guy gets in his way, he's taking them out as well.
Yeah. So obviously that was first. Then it's at the back end of this one. You see that Joker and Scarecrow are working together, because it's when they're sort of talking about making the plan to go and get the mayor. It was an
interesting team up, wasn't it? It was not one that I kind of expected, but actually, when you think about it, isn't that unlogical, is it? You know, you've got someone who lives in the world of chaos and likes chaos, and you've got someone who lives in the world of fear and wants fear. So again, I guess it's, but not used to seeing. Well, I say I'm not used to seeing Joker work with anyone. I'm not used to seeing Joker work with anyone outside of the Batman TV show. When
But yeah, no, that was obviously an inkling for what them two are going to be up to, because there's always like. I know we've said about the villain of the week sort of idea, but there is in each of the issues, there's the main villain of the week, but you also see obviously Bane, because he's the big overlord, and the main guys, so Joker, Scarecrow, you see Riddler turns up in a few. So they are the main ones that people will know. Do float around in the background, and you get snippets of what they're up to.
Well, I thought that was quite nice,
taking out the guy of the week,
to layer in some of those, so you go, oh, they're coming back to that. They're coming back to that, and So you could have your villain of the week, but then have bigger stories building behind it. Basically, I guess the kind of from a street fighter, like when you have to go through like Vega before you get to Bison, that sort of thing. Whereas again, smart stuff early doors. They also in these first couple of issues, and a trend that they keep going through all of it is they quite often layer in post the Arkham escape clips from TV talk shows. Yeah, and you've got the kind of psychologist guy who's there telling the world that they're not the bad guys, the villains, that we're the bad guys, or Batman's the bad guy, because actually, in there. And from a certain sense, they have been slighted and they have been wronged, so no wonder they're angry about it. And again, I thought it was, I thought they're the sort of things that probably elevated it from a very, very basic and generic story into something interesting, because I think that it shows they had a lot to say, and it wasn't just about breaking the Batman. There was more concepts that they were trying to kind of layer in as the story went on. The other one that surprised me that got a lot of book time, the ventriloquist. So quickly before we go on to the ventriloquist, just on this issue, there's a bit right at the beginning where they're escaping from Arkham, and it's Maxie Zeus, who I only really knew from a very small amount of appearances in the TV show, where he's legging it and he runs into a tree. And I don't know why, I just loved it. It just made me laugh. And also I thought, again, it was smart to try and show that not all of Batman's villains are master villains, and some of them are just dolts and idiots. But of course, it's actually post that tree where you see the ventriloquist, and he's joined by, and bad if I butcher the pronunciation, but Amygdala, the big dude. So ventriloquist. He's my Mad Hatter in this. I loved him. I loved every second that the ventriloquist had in these comic books, and I haven't yet, because we've still got more to read of this, but I will be hunting down anything post this, and probably even some pre stuff of this, of the ventriloquist, because I love this character. I had a very small amount of knowledge of his existence. I think more so I knew the Scarface doll, which will become like a story element as we go through this, but they really sold me on ventriloquist. I loved it. Absolutely spot on for me.
Because I knew him because he was in the animated series. He was one of the ones that turned up in sort of like season 3 or 4. They started bringing in more obscure villains. So I'd known him from that, and it's just that one of like, I'm just like, yeah, he is the one that, of the bit part ones, as I would call them, the lesser knowns. I think he is the one that has the best exposure.
Yeah.
Through it, and also he has his own arc.
Yeah.
As he goes through trying to get the right dolls.
Yeah, and you know, like I mean, his quest, isn't it, is to try and get his previous doll, which was Scarface, which is a gangster doll, which had been taken away from him, and I guess rightfully so when he was put into Arkham. But I think at this early stage, he puts a sock on his hands, doesn't he? You know, a kind of Mr. Socko, WWE Mankind kind of world. I think this would precursor that. So I don't know whether that's where Nick got it from, but yeah, as you say, I mean, his quest is he's just trying to get Scarface back, and initially he's joined by the Muscle, which is Amygdala, who is just an absolute brute, isn't he? A brute with no brain, but when he loses his temper, he really loses it. Almost kind of Hulk-esque, but without him being a kind of hero and turning green. And he joins Scarface along the way. And there's just like a lovely moment in this where, and I say a lovely moment, probably shouldn't describe it as lovely, but where they go to a bar and they say the ventriloquist is trying to track down Scarface. And basically all the hoods in the bar, they just mock him and laugh at him because, again, he's a C-list, D-list villain, and they pay a heavy price when Amygdala just beats most of them to death. Is the honest truth. And again, I think it's where at this stage, like, the ventriloquist isn't shown as much more of a threat. He's shown more as a lunatic, isn't he? You don't kind of see that he could be a threat. And I think having some muscle with him, you kind of go, okay. But when we talk about it as kind of the villain of the week, Batman does come in to take Amygdala down, doesn't he? And again, leaning into what this story is progressively more and more about is this is happening over a short period of time. So this is still, I want to say, probably night one after the Arkham break, and you know he's having to go into fights like this against hugely stronger people than him who are doing damage to him that he's just about beating, and it's driving him to kind of be racked with pain and racked with exhaustion. But to my absolute delight, ventriloquist doesn't become a villain of the week and does escape at the end of the issue, kind of weirdly, just by hiding behind a cabinet or some shelves and crawling out. But I like the fact that it meant I was going to get more of this, because I was already bought into the will he find Scarface again story. But yeah, so you know, Bats takes a battering, but ultimately wins again, knocking another one off the list of villains that he needs to take down. Yeah,
and then I can't remember. It's after that? I think it's when you first get the first fight with Firefly. It was after that. And it's
Zaz first, isn't it? You get the Zaz story first. Yeah, that one comes after that. So I mean, you mentioned him earlier, like the artistic portrayal of Zaz and his weirdly, what I can only imagine were meant to be very big eyelashes.
Yeah,
the art style.
Yeah, it's one of those of like a lot of the portrayals of Zaz. He's always quite, to nick a film reference of a film I know you don't like. He's very like Gollum in Lord of the Rings. He's very sort of weird, crawly sort of.
Okay. Funny enough, because I was going to ask you about your Zaz experience, because I've read one Zaz story somewhere along the line, and I think it was Legends of the Dark Knight, which is a kind of premium glossier version of Batman that they released for a little while, where they just let creators come on and tell a story for 5 issues. Some of them were Elseworldsy, and someone did a Zaz story in that, which focused on the fact that he notched in a cut on himself every time he killed someone, and the idea of that story is that people were being killed while Zaz was in Arkham in a kind of Zaz-esque fashion, and no new marks were showing up on him because Batman kept coming and looking, and then ultimately you find out that yes, he had been escaping through a tunnel and that he'd been putting like the marks between his toes and stuff like that so that Batman wouldn't see it. But I'd had limited exposure to him, and I wasn't entirely sure kind of what his story was.
So basically, I haven't read like the origins-y parts, but he's always just there. Basically, he's just a fucking psycho that likes to kill people.
And this one, I mean, he come across a bit kind of not like he takes a load of girls prisoner, doesn't he? In a school, and I don't know. He come across quite menacing in that way, as if like his targets generally are young girls. It felt a bit kind of To Catch a Predator-esque like that. But I didn't know whether that was his kind of, whether he just killed anyone and he just happened to be near a school, or whether he was a young girl murderer.
He will kill anyone, but it's normally females, and it's usually in a similar sort of scenario as what they do in this. That it's, go in, trap some people, kill 1 or 2 of them in front of others. A little bit 80s slasher film style bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, in this he has the kind of plot point, doesn't he, where he's held them all captive, and he says to the police, if you send anyone in, I'll kill one. And it's almost like baiting them to do it so that he can then do it to prove a point, to kind of go, I told you, that sort of thing. Like a very sort of sadistic version of being a killer. Not just driving his pleasure from the kill, but driving his pleasure from making other people know that they caused that person their life. Yeah.
So you do get those sort of moments, but as I said, a lot of the time it's just he goes out on a killing spree and Batman manages to stop him. But yeah, it's one of those it's an easy trope to do, but I just feel in this, I do think it's just the way that it's drawn. Zaz doesn't have that same level of weirdness, because as I said, he's usually quite stalkerish, as well as putting the fear of God into people and forcing them to, because in one of the ones I've read, he basically takes a family and forces them to choose which order they get killed in, and then he goes against the way they do it. He's got that sort of horror film 80s villain vibe going on.
I mean visually kind of like really his visual gig is the marks, isn't it? Like the scars for everyone he's killed, so it kind of makes him have to be topless in every scene he's in, otherwise he's just a dude, isn't he? Like just a murdery dude. So I can see the kind of limitations from that side. I mean, he felt like he was in this as the villain of the week. For me, like this felt like a kind of, let's put another trial in front of Batman and he'll knock it out of the park relatively quickly, but with a bit of resistance and a bit of fighting, which did happen. So I think it does its job from there. I quite like that we started to in issues certainly see some of the supporting Gotham cast, because in this one you get Detective Montoya sort of attempt to kind of come in there and save the day on her own. And I thought it was nice to start getting some of the other characters fleshed out a bit in the Batman universe, because yes, this is Bane versus Batman, but of course that's one of the things that makes Batman so compelling and Gotham so compelling, is that not only are the villains great, he's probably got the best rogues gallery, but that there are all these other characters around him that are also interesting, and a lot of them being, let's say, parts of the police department who either help him or restrict him in some cases. The only other thing that I'd really noted is around this time as well, they really start pushing Batman being the one man to do this, because the tail end of the last issue and this one, he really sort of he starts to tell Robin to kind of wait in the car and don't do anything. And it's around this time that Robin has an encounter with Bird, who's one of Bane's hoods, let's say, because he tracks him down, and Robin also breaks into the school, the same as Batman, and Bats is very much leaning on, no, Robin, this is my problem. Like, you shouldn't be involved. And I think contextually, and this is the hard part, because there's a big gap between this story happening and now, and me not knowing the gap between. But this isn't too many years off of the Jason Todd as Robin being killed by Joker, and I think you start to see elements of that be injected into this story.
Because is that 88 or 89?
I think it's 89. I think
it's around then.
Yeah.
That obviously they do the Death in the Family, and so obviously they do reference back to the fact of he's already down 2 Robins, because obviously Grayson's Nightwing at this point, and Jason Todd's been bashed into oblivion. So you do get that. It's the start point of Batman being very much of, no, this isn't happening again. I'm doing this, because obviously I don't know if you've read Death in the Family, but Batman's main thing with that was, I let him get into that position where that happened. So obviously you do need that little bit of pre-knowledge. Yeah. To know why Batman's the way that Batman is, and he's not going, yes, all my buddies, all my super friends, come and help.
Well, it's layering in that. So I guess it's quite easy in these stories to show the physical toll. They really are showing that. But I think this is where they really start to lean into that mental anguish and mental exhaustion that he's feeling at this part. He is now, despite taking Tim Drake on as Robin, he's very much a kind of at arm's length Robin. You can come and sit in the car and watch me do stuff, or you can do like menial tasks, which we'll get to in the kind of the Firefly stuff, or stuff in the Batcave. But this is my one-man mission, and the toll that's taken on him. But I think they do it kind of really effectively, and they start to kind of layer in. You see a bit more of Commissioner Gordon around this point as well, and the mayor starting to lose patience with Gordon after the Arkham escape, and you get some little smatterings of payoff for that in this story as it goes forward. But as I say, I think this was despite it being villain of the week, this was really where we started to flesh out, as I say, the mental side of this on Batman, and that there are other people out there who probably could help, but are not being allowed to help because Batman's holding them off at arm's length.
Yeah. I can't remember who was next after that. It was Firefly then, wasn't it? And then that's the one where Robin goes, and he's tasked with go and sort out Firefly, because that's the point when Joker and Thingy, isn't it? Say the mayor. So goes off.
So Firefly starting fires, doesn't he? I mean, in effect, and. It felt like one that they focus on. I mean, he almost got like 3 issues, I think, to see kind of the end point of his story. And I couldn't help but feel like they did that because they liked the visuals of there being fire, because the art kind of style very much changed at this point to obviously a lot of the Batman stuff is black and dark blues and things like that, but then like the palette of color in the issue changed to a lot of reds and oranges, because all these fights are kind of happening next to a fire. But I don't know. I mean, the Firefly story. This was the weakest part of let's say part 1 of Knightfall for me. I struggled a little bit through that because I just had no interest in Firefly.
It
just didn't seem like a Batman villain to me. Like,
no. The thing is, he's in the games. and that's when my first exposure came to him, was in the games, because he's in Arkham Knight, and I think he's a bit in City as well.
Yeah,
but he is like super generic enemy of the week.
Yeah,
and it's just like, well done, you're going around with a flamethrower.
Well, and you said, like, Robin goes off and does a bit of investigating and finds out some backstory stuff, which helps identify where he's going to be, and ultimately helps Batman stop Firefly. Although I felt like with little or no recognition to what Robin did to kind of get him there. But even with that fleshing out, you still just kind of went, oh, he is so generic, though, isn't he? He's just a dude with a flamethrower and some really crappy little wings and stuff. But of course, I think, you know, at this stage, we really are trying to pile on the physical toll on Batman, and him having to fight this guy like 3 times before he takes him down, and those fights having to take place, you know, in burning buildings and things like that. Again, you know, it's that exhaustion level, and just piling onto Batman. Again, the random notes you write. So Robin goes to a nunnery, let's say, but I think it's where orphan children had been. So it's so it's where Firefly had grown up, and he finds out that Firefly had a sister, and that's how they lead the story on. The disappearing nun. What was that all about? So for context, for someone who's watching this who hasn't read it, like, Robin goes and talks to a nun. This nun gives an absolutely fantastic amount of information to Robin, and then, like, when Robin turns around, she's disappeared, almost Batman-like, and also, like, even mentions it's almost Batman-like. Should I expect to see that nun again? Is that nun going to come back and play a part at some point, or was it just a random nun?
What I got is, it's like a weird ghost.
That's also went through my head.
Because I went very much, Nightmare on Elm Street, I think it's either 4 or 5, when they tell you that his mum was locked in the bell tower and raped, and they then see her ghost in the...
See, I did wonder that.
That's where I went with that. Anyway, I just thought it was...
That's the thing. I did wonder whether it's like Ghost, or whether it was someone who, like, I don't know, whether we're going to get like Batnun later on or something like that. Well, I was interested either way, but I just thought, unfortunately, I've got a feeling this is just going to be a throwaway moment that we never kind of pick up on again. And it really tweaked my interest. I was like, I want more Ghost Nun, please.
But yeah, as I said, it other than the fact, obviously, it makes sense on why they used him because of, like, the fire and stuff like that. You could have done with many other bad guys for this part.
Yeah, but I guess like, also they probably didn't want to use all of the biggies all of the time, did they? I think there probably was that, like, let's layer in some others. But by the way, like, also, like, during these issues, as I say, we keep getting the further adventures of the ventriloquist as he continues to hunt for Scarface going on, and I know you mentioned it earlier, that kind of in the background layering in that the Joker and the Scarecrow are working together and are now controlling the mayor using fear gas and kind of deciding exactly what they're going to do now that they're working together with it. And again, I think that's the nice thing, is that in all these issues, even with the villain of the week stuff, you are getting the bigger story told, and again, Bane kind of always that presence in the background. I mean, most of the scenes that we see of Bane up until this point is quite often like Bane's minions saying, well, why don't you just go and take Batman out? Look, he's in trouble, and you know, constantly Bane saying, no, he's not ready yet. He's not ready yet. You know, we haven't broken him yet. And that kind of impending doom of Bane over the entirety of this story as it's happening.
And then, is this the point where the ventriloquist gets the police doll, isn't it?
Yeah,
goes in, and that was my favourite moment of just
absolutely love it.
Him and the sock arguing over which locker box to look into to find the keys.
And again, you know, like there's a layering for what's to come, but yeah, like this concept of going. So not only have you got this guy who, if you put something on his hand, it gets his own personality and he has a conversation with it. But then if he has a puppet on each hand, they each have their own personality based off of the kind of doll that it is, and you know, like where that goes from there. I just give me more ventriloquist, guy. I need a ventriloquist ongoing monthly to get me through the days.
Just the ventriloquist on his own. Fuck Batman doesn't need that.
Oh yeah. Literally, him getting random dolls and having conversations and seeing what personalities they come out with. That I'd pay for that. I really would. We do have a kind of moment around here as well where talking about like kind of Robin being put on the back burner, but Robin kind of going forward and actually pushing stuff himself. He actually tracks down Bane and starts to follow Bane, does what Bats, I'd say, he has been unable to do, but what has, I guess, been unwilling to do at this point, because, you know, his focus has been, I've got to capture all these. And Robin's almost going, well, I will help with this bit because you'll need this ultimately. And we do get a nice issue in there where Bane knows he's being followed and just captures Robin and kind of just teases Robin, doesn't he? Like hangs him up by his feet over water and just basically sort of lets him know that he's zero threat to him. And but at the same time, and we'd had the intro of this issue showing him, but we have Killer Croc, and we have Killer Croc then, I'd say, helping Robin, but not because he wants to help Robin, but because he wants to fight Bane.
It's very much that the Hulk versus Thing moment of which one of these two big brutes is the biggest dog in the yard.
And it was interesting because I wanted to like bring up this bit because I think it's one of the bits that you won't have read because I think it's in the prelude. So you know I said Bane does show up. Yeah. Bane breaks both of his arms in an earlier issue, like in that run, in that year in between. Like there's kind of a moment where they face off. I can't remember what sort of makes them be in the same place at the same time, but they're in the same place at the same time. And Bane, fucks him up and breaks both of his arms. So that's why he's got a particular kind of hatred for Bane. So when he sees Bane, that's why he goes for him quite as badly as he does.
See, I just thought it was, you know, which one was the bigger Ralph the dog, but that Mal makes more sense.
Yeah. And of course we get like a nice in this so far we've just seen Batman fighting people, but again it gives Bane another chance to show Bane fighting someone and fighting quite an imposing figure as well, and you know it leads to Robin being able to escape, so you know like Robin is back in the story, but again I think just ways of layering in that Robin has skills and maybe Batman needs to rely on him. And if he leaves Robin on his own, actually, that's probably putting Robin in more risk, akin to kind of Death in the Family of going, no, like, if Batman had him with him, maybe he wouldn't put himself in perilous situations along the way.
Yeah. I think it's this one. Is this where they blow the bridge up or the tunnel up, isn't it? Where Joker and...
Oh, well, I think that's a couple down. I think this is, I think we've got, so there's a few bits, and again, I didn't know how this played for you, but there's a few bits around these issues as well, where you get a few phone calls between Bruce and Chandra, and I can't remember what her surname is, but...
The Doctor, yeah.
The Doctor, and there's, again, for context, in the prelude stuff to this, he'd been seeing her for a little while beforehand. And when I say seeing her in a professional capacity, so say in that year in between, that they'd been going, oh, like this is taking too much of a physical and a mental toll on you. So we'd actually started to see her in a professional capacity, and she'd kind of helped. But of course, once he hits this bit, he stops seeing this Doctor, and because you know he's out fighting every night against Arkham escapees. So. Again, for context, there is a kind of a little bit of history there. Before we get to the tunnel bit, though, there's one storyline that does happen in there that we've missed out on is Poison Ivy. So, so Bruce finally gets home, has a little bit of a kip, but unfortunately is told that he has to go to a ball that evening, he goes to said ball, but it's a ball that Poison Ivy has targeted as a way of kidnapping the men, and ultimately, I mean, I put down here, I wasn't entirely sure what her motivation was. It just seemed to be get their money by kind of enthralling them, which is, again, quite generic. And I think she was kind of made into a generic villain of the week here. I was quite surprised by her look. I guess I'm used to more modern Poison Ivy interpretations, and I guess she's a lot more kind of embrace the flower type thing now, where she is green and slinky and younger looking and things like that. And I thought she was drawn almost like a 1950s movie star for me, and had a few years on her. And I guess this is the stage where they're still depicting her as, I don't know, the kind of the Jezebel woman who is using her powers to take advantage of men, rather than as I say, the Poison Ivy I'm more used to, which is a bit of more of a, I love plants, I'm here about the environment, I don't really like humans, I want plants to rule the earth sort of Ivy. So it was a bit of a jar for me, where I was like, I don't really get this, and just didn't make me want to read more Poison Ivy. I thought, get her back in Arkham. She's quite bland in this appearance.
Yeah, the issue, the problem with Ivy is that because now what they've done with her is so radically different to what she has or was used as a lot of the time, that I think some of these earlier sort of incarnations, because even if you go back to the Uma Thurman portrayal in the film, it's still very, I'm using my sex appeal to get men to do what I want.
I'm using plant pheromones. Yeah. I've got something out of this plant that makes men want to give me their money even more, that sort of thing. Yeah, I say very kind of generic-y for me, and I think they do better stuff with her now. Is the honest truth.
As I say, the whole her and Harley thing has very much changed that character, and for the better.
Yeah. And of course, like Batman to stop Poison Ivy, because he's still an honourable man and isn't going to go toe to toe with her. There's a load of muscular, non-clothes wearing men with pods, plant pods on them that he has to go through. And again, he takes quite a battering, but he makes it through the battering, and just takes out Poison Ivy with a swift kick that, if she'd have been a man, looked like a kick to the nuts. But I don't know whether that was what they were going for. But yeah, so he strikes kind of another one of his villains off of the list. And there is one other that gets a kind of big bit around this before we get to like the tunnels and the Joker and the Scarecrow, and that is, and I think this kind of happens somewhat simultaneously, but we get the Riddler back.
Yes.
And the Riddler was a really interesting take for me, because again, Riddler TV show, I know some Riddler stories set in the Scott Snyder and the Tom King Batman, and I feel like he's one that is a well-known Batman villain, but at this point, or maybe this was the point that started it, where he was thrust down the sort of the power level of villains. He was starting to become a bit of a joke, and I think they really kind of lean into this, where his hoods even turn on him and say, why are you doing riddles? Why don't we just go and rob this place? And I thought it was, again, for further storytelling, I think they sowed the seeds here really well of what the Riddler will probably become for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years, whatever, of writing, because they make him kind of more of a joke. And then he goes to a TV show, doesn't he? The TV show, the talk show that we've seen previously in here, and starts to ask his riddles, and he's very handily and quickly taken down by Robin. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that throughout this, as much as the Bane Batman story was a focus, that they were still doing story beats with some of these other characters to layer in, as I say, future storylines, hopefully.
Yeah, and as I said, obviously, I know we go back to saying hero of the week or villain of the week stuff, but they are you are getting something of them. They're not literally just there to be the punching bag.
Yeah.
I mean, the only two that there's no real sort of characterness to is Ivy and Zaz.
Yeah.
I mean, those two are pretty, it's just them. There's their set point. They're very much set piece moments, but like you do get a little bit of story with Mad Hatter. You get obviously the stuff with Ventriloquist. You get stuff with Firefly to expose, where he's coming, where he's going to go, and Ghost Nun. And
that's got to be after my Ventriloquist comic comes out. Ghost Nun's got to be the follow up. Maybe that's what we do. We focus our efforts on writing Ghost Nun, the soon to be best selling comic book.
But yeah, it's this point I think where we stop getting so much of the small time ones. I know we do get a few of them as part of Bane's last line of defense. Like you get the Cavalier, Bird gets his moment. And there's another one that's with Bane because he's got 3.
Yeah, I can't remember what the old dude's name is. I wish because I wrote some stuff down, and it's one of the ones I didn't write down. But yeah, I mean, it is Film Freak. Yeah.
And so you get them all have their little moments, but there's no real character development.
And Batman's even sort of starting to say it out loud himself at this point, isn't he? You're going, yep, I'm knackered, I'm destroyed, and I've still got some of my biggies to go through. I think there's a particular line where he name checks Scarecrow, Joker, and he mentions the Riddler as well because this is pre Robin taking down the Riddler. But yeah, Batman's even saying it of going, yes, I've got through these, but the biggies are still to come. I mean, we do get a great moment in here with the Scarecrow and the Joker where they use the. Look, I've got to stop using terms like great when mass death happens afterwards, but. They use the fear gas to get the mayor to basically call the police out to a site where the Joker is, and it's all a trick to get all the cops to turn up there, and then they blow it up, taking out a load of the police, and you just go, well, actually, from a Joker storyline kind of fashion, it's the sort of thing you imagine he would do, that like pure chaos of going, yeah, come on down, let's take out a load of the police. Looking at those sort of similarities between what Nolan does later on with Bane in the Batman Rises. I mean, he doesn't do it like this, but obviously he takes that kind of concept of going, well, why is this Batman's one-man war? Well, actually, if we take a load of the police out, it makes it even a little bit more sensible that it potentially is a one-man war at this point because you've got a load of them taken out. And yeah, I mean, Nolan does it by locking them all in a sewer, which not one of his best moments in his Batman pantheon. But yeah, I thought a cracking idea of how to do it. And you start to see around this time a bit of strain between the Scarecrow and Joker because there's some interesting stuff around Joker getting, as he so often is, fixated on the Batman. He's going like, yeah, okay, for our next trick, we need to get Batman. And Scarecrow's kind of going, what are you doing, mate? Like, we can take over this city. Why you always focus on Batman? And of course, Joker's then saying, but if you don't take out Batman, you don't have the city. And yeah, again, I thought it was a nice, you could have gone very generic with these two and just sort of said, oh, they're teaming up. But I like the fact that they were having these discussions around what was the best way to seize power, but whilst also doffing the cap to the fact that Joker will always be obsessed with Batman, even if there is some decent logic behind it.
It's the thing. It's like I think those two are the only two that don't really mention about Bane at any point. They're very much on, oh fuck, we can do what we like. Let's fucking really cause some chaos because we know Batman is busy. And it's at that point where them two start bickering about whose idea to do and the best idea. And
they probably, in theory, certainly with the Joker, is probably the one who wouldn't perceive Bane as a threat at this point. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of they've almost got the perfect opportunity to win. And I think that's sometimes when people do villain stories so well is that they can't get out of the way of themselves. So even though they're in that position, they're now going to bicker about it and possibly cost themselves the victory because they can't just get along for the couple of hours they need to get along to actually make this work for them. But yeah, I mean, they do come to kind of a semi-agreement, don't they? Where it's almost, well, let's kind of do both, but primarily I think leaning into kind of the Joker theory of let's take the mayor down into, I don't want to say the sewers. That's a lie, isn't it? It's kind of
it's the tunnel under the road
under
tunnel,
the river, under the river, and kind of draw Batman in using the mayor. And again, I think it does some stuff quite well here because Batman's not dumb. He's never been shown as dumb. He knows it's a trap. Everyone knows it's a trap. But again, he's Batman. It's his job.
He's got to save the mayor.
Go and do it. Yeah, he's got to save the mayor. Like no matter what the cost, and he's got to stop Scarecrow, and he's got to stop Joker. And again, some lovely interplay between Scarecrow and Joker. And again, I think like these two were kind of outside of Bane thrust as the main threat. But I think it is this issue where you start to see the Joker's dominance come in. Joker is the top boy here. Like you can almost now at this point see that Joker's just been using Scarecrow because that's what he would do. He's just a lackey in the Joker's mind, and I think it really starts to come across in here the way he starts speaking to the Joker. He's almost like, right, I'll nip off over out the way. You go and take on Batman.
You go use your fear gas. Off you go.
Yeah.
I'll stay at the back here with this rocket launcher.
yeah, and again, I mean, like it's kind of, I guess, a nice circular bit where the story started, didn't it, with Bane releasing them all by bazookaing open the prison, and we sweep back to now, and as we come to the culmination of Scarecrow and Joker, there they are in a tunnel with a rocket launcher, and it would be heartbreaking to have a story in a tunnel with a rocket launcher if that rocket launcher didn't, and not be used. So yes, the rocket launcher does get fired, and we get a flood in the tunnel. And again, I thought at this stage of the story it was an interesting and a unique twist because we'd had Batman's perils mainly being fight, a little bit of fire when we had the Firefly stuff. But I thought it was quite interesting to see that this kind of next peril of Batman was about trying to save the mayor and trying to save them at pushing again himself to his physical limit underwater to try and save his life. And I guess like by extension, Batman's own life. But yeah, I think primarily it's about saving the life of the mayor.
Yeah, and it's that thing where again, as you say, it's just another physical torture because it's strenuous, and that sort of, you see him struggling to open up the vent door and things like that. So you again, it's a lot of the story tropes are simple. I'm not going to say this is some sort of groundbreaking literature, but it's stuff that you understand that after the couple of days that he's had, because I think he's a couple of days in by that point, that after all of this constantly, Batman's fucked.
Yeah.
Bruce is human. This is that point where it shows that, your hero is human.
And as you say, I mean, like, and again, I think at the end of Knightfall, we'll probably sort of touch on the way that it's written. But even at the end of this point, I mean, some of it's quite ham-fisted, isn't it? But like, you get the mayor when he's talking to, I think it's Gordon, and he explicitly kind of goes, he could have left me, but he did everything, pushed himself to the absolute limits to save me. And again, I know it's hammering home, this is what and this is who Batman is. And as I say, could it been done a bit with a sharper, smarter dialogue, or did it even need to be said? Arguable either way, but it does serve the story. And I think, like, I've got no issues with it because again, you're kind of going, Batman has, at the end of all of this, he has still taken the time to save that human being. It's not all just about stopping the bad guys. It's about making sure that He's
people
protected
don't die.
Gotham. Yeah.
It's that very much, Batman can't let anyone die, whether they be bad or good.
Yeah.
No loss of life.
Yeah, like we said earlier on, like Batman doesn't take life, but Batman also, it's paramount to him to save life, as you say. Like he'll do that, and again, leaning back into like his personal tragedy in the last like comic book few years, but probably storyline, like actual storyline wise, probably within a year of this kind of happening, is him losing someone close to him. So like he sees life as ultimately even more precious now. But yeah, like I think, and again, I think this is kind of the physical exhaustion hitting, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's more to come, and then not a lot more before we get to kind of him versus Bane. But I think this is the end of kind of, I guess, the physical gauntlet for him, and then we kind of jump onto post that saving. There's something he still needs to do, and that's get the Joker. And I do think this was one of the standouts for me in the storyline. I really, really liked this issue where he basically hunts down the Joker, goes one-on-one with the Joker, and as I say, we've seen him pushed to his physical limits, and in this, like, the Joker isn't really a physical threat to him, is he? No. Batman kind of handily takes care of him, which I guess, like we've seen depictions of the Joker as being a good fighter, probably because of the mania that he'll let sort of take over, but yeah, this was a real lopsided battle, but this felt like the end of his mental exhaustion, didn't it? He kind of hit his mental tether at this point. Like so much of it was around because he'd been sprayed with fear gas just before the fight, hadn't he? And,
yeah, because that's the flashbacks to
Jason Todd. Yeah.
So he's going in with baked in fear, but yet still just, as you say, easily takes down Joker.
Fueled with righteous hatred, wasn't it? In fact, if anything, I think what this does quite well is because of that, because of the fear gas beforehand and it bringing all this up, and you start to see him wailing in, doesn't he? Like he is losing it. He doesn't kill, but there are parts in this fight where I think you're supposed to be intimated of going, he's losing it so much, he might go over the edge here and do something that he would never normally do.
Yeah, is that sort of, is he taking it too far?
Yeah.
But, Batman being the good guy that he is, keeps it in.
Yeah.
And then this is the point where he then goes home, doesn't he? And
yeah. I mean, like, he's kind of done it, hasn't he? He's done everything. And when I say he's done everything he needed to do. He's got all of the Arkham escapees, and yeah, I imagine if I'm Batman at this point, I'm going, I do know I need to take out Bane, but I'm probably going to go home, have a couple of hours kit, knowing me, probably a cigarette, cup of tea
or two.
Yeah, and then we'll get onto the Bane thing. But like, yeah, it's almost kind of, as I say, that point, isn't it, where he's going home thinking, I've done that. I've done that thing I needed to do. And he goes home, and unfortunately, he's greeted by not the greatest thing that you want when you get home, which is if you want a cup of tea, what you don't want to find is your butler knocked out on the floor, because that means you'd have to make your own tea, doesn't it? And that was a heartbreaking idea for me.
Yeah, just think, the one thing you want when you get in after a few hard days of slogging away at supervillains, is to make your own food and drink. Yeah,
I mean, he's not even going to get a cheeky Alfred back rub, is he, if he's laid out on the floor? But and we get the reveal that there's a reason why Alfred's not just being lazy. Bane is in Wayne Manor, and Bane is waiting for Batman. And of course, like, there's I mean, we've known it. It's part of the story. We've known it, but this is the first time that Batman realizes that Bane has figured out who he is. You know, a very, very closely guarded secret in the Batman world. So again, you've got him physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. He hasn't had his cup of tea because his butler's laying down, and he finds out that his biggest secret is now exposed to someone who, at this point, must be feeling like one, if not his greatest villain of all time, or his greatest nemesis of all time.
And it's the fact that he even calls him Bruce Wayne. Is that sort of big thing? It's not just I found you at Wayne Manor.
Yeah.
I know who you are.
But he also kind of did it a bit sarky arsehole, which I quite like, because it's a bit like, well, of course it's you. Who else was it going to be? And again, I think it kind of speaks to like what a lot of people have said along the way about superhero kind of. I know my missus is a big one about Superman. She's going, well, he looks the same. He just puts glasses on, and you go like, suspend your disbelief. But I think a lot of people seem to always kind of go, well, of course people would know he's Bruce Wayne, because who else would be a billionaire and be able to do this? And you go, well, you wouldn't know he's a billionaire, would you? Like, that's stuff we know because we see the stories, we read the stories. And I don't think it would be such an easy connection, but I kind of like the way that they did that, of going, and I felt it was a bit more like, well, if you're my enemy and I'm going to find out everything I can about you, then I'm going to put two and two together, because I'm going to follow you. I'm going to notice all this stuff. I'm going to notice these patterns. And again, adds that added, unless you probably didn't need any more threat at this point, but I think suddenly you've got Batman going, shit, I can't lose this fight now, because this guy knows, and of course, I mean, how can you, what's the only way you can make him not know? And that's by killing him, and that's what Batman doesn't do. So I think that's why it was just such a clever point to introduce that into the story at this point.
And then we get a whole issue of Bane beating the ever-living shit out of Batman across all of Wayne Manor.
Batman's fight's pretty much gone at this point, hasn't he? I mean, they really do depict this as a lopsided. As much as we were saying like the fight against Joker was lopsided, this is the uber lopsided fight in this storyline, where, as you say, Bane just knocks 10 bells of shite out of him in every room. I mean, it's almost like a kind of WWE match where, you know, they go up through the crowd, then they get to the popcorn machine, and then they bring them back down again and stuff like that. You know, he's almost showing off for a crowd, isn't he?
It's a bit like, if you remember, the Money in the Bank during the pandemic.
Yes.
They go through all of Titan Towers in every room.
See, now I know how they booked that match. Now I know where they got their ideas from.
But instead of going up to the roof, they went down to the cave.
And you know, like he's sort of verbally berating him while he's doing it as well, isn't he? He's not only physically destroying him, but he's almost going, I knew you were this. I knew you weren't as good as me. I knew I could break you, and like you're just nothing to me. I've destroyed you. I've destroyed everything about you. I've destroyed your body. I've destroyed your spirit. And God, like, it was just like I was sitting there thinking when I was reading it, you asshole, just beat him. Like, we don't need to. You don't need to kind of you don't need to talk shit at him while you're doing it. And then I guess the wrestling fan in me come out and went, yeah, actually do talk shit at him. But yeah, you know, he really does take the time, doesn't he, to let Batman know, I as a person. You've gone through all these trials, but this was all me. I've created the situation, and I have beaten the unbeatable here. You are nothing. And you know, he gets into a point where he actually talks to him about killing him, doesn't he? But he says, I don't need to kill you anymore because I've broken you. And then we get to, I guess, the magical moment of the storyline, let's be honest, but the magical moment of it for me, where you get the scene where Bane hoists Batman up above his head, brings him down in an amazing backbreaker, and as we find out, a quite literal backbreaker, as he strews Batman across his knee and breaks Batman's back.
And added leverage with the push down as well. Give you all that wrestling love.
I mean, it's a totally kind of iconic scene in comic books, isn't it? I know we said in the top 5 episode where we talked about Killing Joke, and when I see Joker, I see images of Joker from that, and I think it's kind of one of those comic book moments where if someone says Batman to me, it's one of the visuals that flashes into my head first. You know, the bat being broken, and you know, like it's what the story was there to achieve, wasn't it? It's what the bad guy wanted to do. It's what all of these issues, and as we say, I mean, this is a long. A lot of issues to get to this point, isn't there? And I think, you know, like, but I think it has. You could just done this in one issue. Bane could have turned up, been a badass, and broken Batman's back, and you could have gone, "Woo, there's our moment." But I quite like the fact that they showed that he had to do all of this to get Batman to this point. He had to, as we say, break the human, break the spirit, break the mind before he can actually then physically
break the bat.
Break the bat, yeah.
And it's one of those of, I think the best bit with the fight though is the fact of he is still physically breaking him and mentally breaking him as he's fighting him around, and then it's that realization of, I could kill you, I'm not going to, I'm just going to completely fuck you up and leave you, as he thinks at that point, basically a vegetable. Total
dominance, total control, isn't it? And you know, like he's and again, you know, like we say he breaks his back. That's something that we actually find out. But you know, it's pretty clear from the crack in it. But you know, he's laying the groundworks here to say, I don't come back. No matter what you think, just don't come back, because there's no coming back from this. I've destroyed every fibre of what makes you who you are. And, you know, taking that extra time, that sadistic time at the end, to really kind of hammer that home. But I think, the idea is to say that there is no coming back from this, mate, neither physically nor mentally. I've destroyed you and everything about you.
Yeah, and as you say, it is a very, very iconic image. So that's pretty much where the first part of this will come to an end.
As we said, it's a long one, but yes, that is a beautiful break point for the story, isn't it?
So obviously what we'll do is in the next part, because I will imagine we'll probably get through that in less than the 2 hours it's taken us to get through part 1.
I must admit, I just looked at the time and went, "Wowzers!" We may look to maybe even cut this one into 2. But yeah, I mean, I think the honest truth is, and you're spot on there, Chris. I think again, stop using this pun, but we've broken the back out of the bulk of this story, and I think the next part of volume 1 is actually going to be a kind of lots shorter and slicker episode, because there just isn't so much to go through for the next part.
In fact, it's only 200 of the 630 pages.
Yeah. So that means the episode should come in at hour? No, it will be much quicker than that, I'm sure.
So once again, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, rate, comments. Tell us what you think about this first part of Knightfall if you have read it. Obviously, watch everything else on the channel. Watch Seddon Unbox Pops. Watch Stu play video games with his missus, and does unbagging is what I would call it, with the little one, with the minifigures and stuff. And obviously, you've got Midian doing figures as well. And obviously, watch the main show and get all of your wonders and entertainment. So until next time, and the rest of Knightfall part 1, we bid you adieu.
Thanks for watching, and just remember, you can join the Cult of Egg by liking and subscribing to this YouTube channel. We release regular content where we talk about all things geek, all things pop culture, and all things that we're interested in. You can also come along and join the discussion on Facebook groups and Renaissance Cast. And you can join us on our Twitch channel where Stu regularly streams games. And if you'd like to support us, then please follow the link for the Patreon. Thanks very much.